Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is a double portion. It is Matot, Masei, and it begins with verse 2 in chapter 30 and takes us to the very end of the book of Numbers. I would like to focus actually on the very first subject that is addressed in this week's Torah portion, and it begins with the issue of vows. If a person takes a vow, he must keep his vow. A vow, this is a religious kind of vow. I mean, the content doesn't have to be religious, but it's a vow that takes into account God. In other words, you are making an oath before God. This is a very serious thing. You have to keep your oath. That's how it begins. And then it goes on to discuss the issue of a woman making a vow. Now, many of the laws that are detailed here having to do with a woman making a vow sound a little strange to our modern ears, and with good reason, because what we see here is a woman who is not married. Her vow can be canceled by her father without asking her opinion, without taking into consideration her wishes. It's a one-sided right or power on the part of her father to cancel her wishes, and there's a very similar power on the part of her husband if she's a married woman. Okay, so on the one hand, you look at this whole situation and you say, what is this? How can a woman not have any independence? How come she has no right to make vows? It's between her and God, and why can't she make a vow? I think if we go more deeply into this issue, we can see that what the Bible has actually done is attempted to strike a balance. A balance on the one hand between there's a recognition here of an independent will and an independent religious, let's say, connection with God of a woman, which I would venture to say at this time, at the time when the Bible was actually written, at the time when these laws were actually given, is quite revolutionary. What we do also absorb on this background is that we have to remember that a woman in biblical times is very rarely independent. Typically, she goes from being under the authority of her father to the authority of her husband. Now, this is not a question of biblical law. This is a question of biblical times. And in fact, this was the rule for most societies all over the world until very, very recently, probably until the 20th century. We all remember have studied, let's say, the suffragette movement, which was taking place at the beginning of the 20th century. Women were not given a right to vote. And a lot of the passions and discussion that was going on at the time revolved around this issue. Does a woman have an independent, not just identity, does she have independent rights? Does she have the right to express her opinion separate from her husband? So we see an assumption here in the Bible that this is the way of the times. A woman, is either under her father's authority or under her husband's authority. And yet, what we also see here is the balance, is the other side of the equation. Because what we see is that there is a time limit, okay? A father is able, and it's a parallel thing with a husband, they're able to cancel her vows only if they cancel it immediately. Meaning, if they actually hear her declare the vow, then they have to cancel it right away. If they don't hear her actually declare the vow, they have to cancel it immediately upon hearing that the vow exists. If they miss that window of opportunity, they're finished, which means that the Bible indeed is giving credence to the independent will of the woman. They are saying, yes, her vow exists. If she were completely without any independent stature, her vow wouldn't exist to begin with. She could say whatever she wanted, but you would say it's irrelevant because she cannot make declarations. And what are these declarations? We'll see in a minute. She cannot make declarations that have any relevance because none of her declarations make sense. That's not what the Bible is saying. Her declarations have validity. They have legal stature. But if the father or the husband wants to cancel them, they have to do it within a very, very limited time period. Okay. We will also see here that a divorced woman or a widowed woman, and these are two women who are completely independent. They may have once been married, but once they are no longer married, once they are either divorced or widowed, it's binding. She is a completely independent woman. She left the authority of her father for the authority of a husband. That husband is no longer. That makes her an totally independent woman. So why the balance? What's the importance of the balance? And I think for this you have to also understand what some of these vows can include. Okay, I'll give you a very simple example. A vow can include a woman says she is not going to eat meat, or she is not going to, wear a certain kind of thing, or she's not going to do a certain kind of work, or whatever. She certainly cannot vow to do something that she's not allowed to do. In other words, she can't violate any obligations, but she can take upon herself additional restrictions. Now, these additional restrictions can affect the harmony of a household. And this is, I would say, particularly true when we're talking about a married woman. And I think this is what the Bible is trying to balance. On the one hand, recognizing that the woman is a woman in her own right. She has a mind of her own. She has desires of her own. She has, at basis, the right to take upon herself additional restrictions if she feels this is something that will be good for her, good for a relationship with God, or for whatever other reason. However, the Bible is also mindful of what this could do through the family. So if you have a woman who is taking upon herself additional restrictions, that can affect the family. All of a sudden she's going to say, I'm not going to serve meat anymore. I'm not going to cook meat. I'm not going to eat meat, whatever. This can create tensions within the family. It can, not necessarily. But what the Bible is also mindful of is the need to retain harmony within the household. Now, today we would say, in our kind of atmosphere, we would say this is something that a man and woman need to discuss together. There should not be, one-sided decisions on either part, not on the part of the woman, not on the part of the man. And today, of course, we are well aware of things like marriage counseling and other vehicles by which we help men and women in a marriage situation come to an understanding and agreement, compromise. In these times, however, it's very possible that those vehicles were not known. This was not part of the mentality of the times. And I think, therefore, what the Bible is trying to do is within the family structure as it was for thousands of years, giving the ability to balance out these two things. And I think when you look at it from this way, you will see that even though women here are clearly restricted in a way that men are not, there is still far more autonomy and far more balance given to the ability of a woman to make decisions than you would have seen in any other society during the biblical period and afterwards for many, many years. And so I think that is really an amazing lesson that we can learn from this. Now, today, of course, this whole situation is dealt with much differently, also within Jewish law. But I think when we read the Bible and we're trying to understand what the Bible is trying to tell us, it's very important to have this perspective. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom. I hope you enjoyed that film. And we have lots more film content and emails and articles that I'm sure you will enjoy as well. Check out our website at CFOIC.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that right from the homepage. I know you will really enjoy the content that will land in your inbox on a regular basis. Hope to see you soon.